Early access games have become increasingly more popular over the last few years, and for good reason. As a developer, you get to deliver your passion project to a wider audience and receive tons of more feedback compared to a closed beta test, and hell, maybe your game will even blow up. Now, of course, there are negatives with releasing into early access, like players not enjoying the game at all as it's not complete enough for their taste or lacks content, and then they may never check the game out again in the future when more updates come. But really, if you get someone like that, are you really missing much? Personally, I don't mind early access games. The most recent ones I've played are Darkest Dungeon 2 and Have a Nice Death, which are both still in early access as of making this video, and they're both good games. But I bought these games knowing they weren't complete, and I'd be putting them down a lot as I wait for updates. And really, that's fine. Both of those games have been really fun, despite some things I didn't like, of course. Now, like I said, early access, it's become really popular as of late, especially in roguelites. The formula for roguelite games just fit early access very well. You want a game that's easily replayable with a lot of content that makes every run feel unique. And really, you can see a lot of roguelites labeled as early access, like the two I mentioned above, but that wasn't always the case. Sure, you could look at the 2009 version of Minecraft as the first early access game, or even PUBG back in 2017, but a game that comes to mind for me that perfected what early access means is Hades. One of the most well-known games ever was an early access game back in 2018, and it didn't leave early access until 2020. Now, personally, I love Hades and would love to talk about it all day long, but this is a video on another game in early access. But the game I want to talk about is a game that I have mentioned in the past but never made a full video on, and it's Tiny Rogues, a bullet hell RPG-esque roguelike that I feel has flown under people's radars. Tiny Rogues launched into early access on Steam on September 23rd of 2022. With it being such a young game, there isn't a lot of development history to talk about, but I'm still going to cover everything that I found out before talking fully on the game. So let's get into it. Even with the game being so young, there still has been some huge updates adding a lot to the core game. We got difficulty enhancers, which we'll talk about in a little bit. A new character was added, tons of new weapons, items, buffs, new rooms, and even added a few new achievements. You can view everything that's been changed on the Steam forums, as that's the best place to find info on any game, really. Let's take a look at who makes this game, and that's Ruby Dev. They're the solo developer who's publishing the game as well. And from the Tiny Rogues press kit, I learned quite a bit actually. Ruby worked every single day while working a part-time job for 6 months before the early access version of Steam was ready. And I'm pretty sure today Ruby is working full-time on Tiny Rogues, as when I first started streaming the game, they came into my chat and we had a great conversation about the game and everything. And really, Ruby watches a lot of streamers and gives good homage to creators who showcase the game. Hell, I was lucky enough to get a little mini boss in the first world be a reference to one of my emotes on Twitch. So really, this game is in amazing hands with Ruby Dev, who listens to the community and truly does care for this game. But what about future plans for Tiny Rogues? And how long is it going to be in early access? Well, luckily with early access games as a developer, you need to fill out a little questionnaire on Steam to give answers to common questions. And for the most common one, it's how long will it be in early access, of course. And for Tiny Rogues, it'll take most likely a year plus before it's ready for its 1.0 launch. But in more good news, that was posted in September of 2022. And in the most recent roadmap post on Steam, you can see that Ruby expects the game to be ready for release by the end of 2023. Sorry, console fans, you're gonna have to wait a little bit for this one, but trust me, it's gonna be worth the wait. But with it still being early access, Ruby is still giving us a teaser with the type of ambition they have for this game. As the next major patch, they want to add over 20 new boss fights, 10 new floors, 100 weapons, 100 equipment items, 30 traits, 10 more classes, and even 40 event rooms. They want to add a lot, and I hope for their sake it isn't too much. But if all of that gets added to the game, let me tell you, this will be the most content-filled early access roguelike game I may have ever seen. And really, that's all the development stuff that I found about the game. So what's even inside of the game? Well, let's talk about that next. There's a lot of content inside a single run of Tiny Rogues. But with that said, a run may only take you about 45 minutes when you're first starting out. Once you figure out the game more, you'd probably take 30 minutes or so. Before each run, you can choose your class. Now, the game has multiple classes that you unlock, and they are unlocked with souls, which is the game's main currency outside of a run, which we'll get to after we discuss the ends of a run. So after picking your class, you need to go through 10 rooms on 10 different floors, with almost every room housing monsters and enemies that all have different attacks. And then each floor ends with a boss fight, and each floor has 2 different bosses you need to worry about. But don't worry, you only fight 1 boss per run, of course. And for some extra fun, there are some secrets to change up the final boss and make it a lot harder, but I won't spoil how you do it, but it's pretty simple. Now, after clearing a single floor, you choose between 2 rooms that each have a reward. The game has a lot of different rewards, and I'll try to cover everything to an extent, so let's go. You have your strength, dexterity, and intelligence rewards, which help level up your character, and after collecting a certain amount of any of them, you level up and get to choose a trait. Each color represents what the trait benefits the most, and the game will tend to give you traits based on whatever type of build you have. This is where the RPG-esqueness comes in, I'd say. You build a run based based off dexterity, strength, or intelligence. Really, it's up to you. Every single run, you're able to build a new character with new traits and allows for a lot of variety. I personally tend to focus on whatever my starting class specializes in, as each class has starting points in each of the 3 areas. I will also say I love that each build has its benefits, and really, one build doesn't feel extremely overpowered compared to the others. If I had to rank them though, I'd say magic builds are my favorite so far. Now, back to other rewards. Besides character building, you have gold, which allows you to buy items in shops, upgrade your weapons, or even buy tons of benefits in the tavern. The tavern is a rest stop, really. Healing isn't free or guaranteed, but you can interact with tons of different NPCs that could sell you different items or help buff you. The only guaranteed NPC in every tavern is the bartender, who can sell you beer for 10 gold and give you tipsiness that lasts 10 rooms. And tipsiness enhances your damage. That's basically what gold does. And before moving to the next reward, I'll say in the latest update, they added an area to sell items not being used, and that was a very nice addition. Next major rewards are keys and bombs, which you want to use sparingly. Keys allow you to open up locked reward chests, open a secret door if you see one, or even just open up the next reward door. And bombs are the same way, really. You can break open rocks with bombs or even blast down a reward door as well. Bombs also can do a lot of damage when fully upgraded, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. I always try to make sure I have a few keys and bombs, as you'll never know when a great reward might be locked behind a door. Those are the major rewards in the game, I'd say, the most common things you'll see. But trust me, there's still more to talk about inside of a run. You could also see 2 different types of shrines in the game. One which buffs you for 10 rooms in a run with no negative implications, and then one shrine which gives you a permanent buff in exchange for a curse, which is just a negative attribution that lasts the rest of the run, unless dispelled by an item. You can also find a lot of general equipment and weapon rewards. Some of them are locked behind the chest that needs a key to be opened, and some of them are just free to pick between 3. And then of course you have your shops that sell different items, and a blacksmith who can upgrade your weapon up to 3 times and refill your armor if you have any. You'll also sometimes find a random room with a question mark that says where could it lead, and those could either be beneficial or negative depending on what you do. Those are a little more rare, and I'll let you discover those if you end up playing. And then finally, the last reward I'll focus on quickly is just potions and enchantments. Potions are buffs for your character that will last a certain number of rooms, and enchantments will buff your weapon for a certain number of rooms. Really, that's all I can think of off the top of my head for the inside of a run on Tiny Rogues. 10 levels with 10 floors each, with tons of enemies, tons of bosses, tons of secret rooms, tons of shops, tons of weapons, items, everything, buffs. So much that you can do. But what about outside of a run? Well, it's pretty simple, I'd say. Much simpler and easier to explain than inside of a run. Outside of a run, you have 12 classes total as of making this video, with the latest release character being the Gunslinger. Now, once you unlock the class, you'll need to spend souls in order to be able to play as them, but don't worry, souls are very easy to come by, and with enough time, you'll have more souls than you know what to do with. You get souls inside of a run, which I would have explained in the last section, but really, the only main use for souls is buying upgrades, classes, and starting items. You can earn souls as a room reward or even trade souls gained in a current run for gold, but really, they're an out-of-run item. Outside of spending souls, there isn't a lot to do outside of a run. You can upgrade multiple things that buff your character for every run, or even buff items like bombs, and most of the attributes can be upgraded multiple times, costing more souls with every purchase. Another use for souls is you can buy starting items, which is what it sounds like. It gives you a nice item to start your run with. You can start with extra bombs or keys. Hell, you could have a tent that fully refills your health once, some potions, or really anything. Final option available outside of a run currently is cinders. These are the difficulty enhancers and modifiers for the run. If you know me, I love difficulty enhancers and roguelites. It makes the roguelite even better and adds so much more replayability to it, in my opinion. And Tiny Rogues does this pretty good for such a young game. The game didn't always have the cinders. They were also added in the most recent update and did tempt me to go back to the game, as I already did everything before that big update. Even without the cinders though, the game still has a lot of difficulty. But I will say it can be kind of easy to get a broken run once you figure out how the game works more. But you still need good mechanical skill to win with that run. Your weapon may melt all the enemies, but hell, you don't get a lot of health in this game in general, which adds to the difficulty. Now back to the cinders. Currently, the game offers 16 cinders, with each cinder adding a negative enhancement to your run. Some examples of these negative enhancements can be bosses dealing double damage during the second phases, more enemies that are enchanted in the run, and even your first trait unlocked being negative. I'll also say the way to unlock these cinders is pretty unique. It's not as simple as a game like Hades, where if you clear the game once, you have the option to with everything. I personally have unlocked up to Cinder 12, but if I want to unlock the last 4 Cinders, I need to get a Cinder streak of 16, which sounds confusing, but it's not too bad. Say I win on Cinder 12, my Cinder streak is 12, so I need to win again without dying, at least on Cinder 4 to unlock Cinder 16. I don't know if that made any sense to you at all, but personally, I'm not the biggest fan of having this convoluted way to unlock Cinders. Just give me all the Cinders right away and let me pick and choose what I want. But it's better than not having any difficulty enhancers at all. And for now, the Cinders are the only difficulty enhancers in the game. But where Tiny Rogues stands out the most for me is the crazy amount of variety everywhere. If you remember when we talked about future updates, Ruby has a lot of plans to add a lot of content, but even now the game has an impressive amount of weapons, equipment, bosses, characters, traits, everything. Sure, some of the items may not be as good, but it wouldn't be fun if everything was overpowered. All the variety makes every run feel very unique, and every class feels like they have a purpose, as every class also has different starting weapons and a different starting buff. The Tiny Rogues doesn't have a codex or anything to show off all the different weapons and equipment like Gungeon does, so I don't know how much is truly available, but every run I play, I swear I'm picking up new items I've never seen. The level of variety in this game reminds me a lot of Enter the Gungeon. Granted, I don't think it's as good as Enter the Gungeon yet, but still, it reminds me of Gungeon, and just like Gungeon, it has a lot of inspiration everywhere. It's just not as easy to see. Really, not much else to say. This game has a lot of inspiration, like I just said, from other games like Enter the Gungeon, Binding of Isaac, and Dark Souls, but still is able to feel unique and fresh in the roguelite genre. Every run feels super unique and fun, and that's really one of the most important things when making a roguelite, as the player will tend to do the same thing a lot in the game. You want the experience to be enjoyable, challenging, and most importantly, fun. Ruby has done a fantastic job at creating a masterful roguelite that feels very complete. I'm very excited to see what more can come to this game and how the world can expand in it. I don't think there's much of a story in this game, but really, that's not a big deal. The game is only about $5 US, so if you have access to PC gaming and want a fresh, fun game that has a good challenge, this one's for you. Early access games tend to get more expensive once they fully release, so get this steal of a game when you can. That's all I have to say about Tiny Rogues, really. An early access game you should try. Thanks for watching, and a special shout out to the people that support me on Patreon still. Your support means the world to me and allows me to do this full time. So thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe if you liked it, I guess. And I'll see you next time. Bye.